Hey, good morning. It's Mark. I want to talk with you today about an interesting dichotomy in the market for physician services. So let's say you're a leader of a large group. It could be a hospital-based group where a lot of this activity is taking place, but it could also be an office-based practice, a large oncology practice, for example, or a significant size orthopedic surgery practice. It goes on from there. So what we're seeing is a polarization. At one end of the spectrum, we're seeing practices that have or are interested in selling, most oftentimes to an entity that's either backed by private equity money or an entity that is publicly traded. Other end of the spectrum, we see smaller practices, although they can be of significant size. Some of my clients are in the many hundreds of physicians in terms of the size of the group. But those, we'll call them independent for a moment, groups, tend to be structured in a way in which every physician who passes the cut, or most physicians who pass the cut, become owners in the group. Whether they're called partners or shareholders, it doesn't make any difference. They are engaged with the expectation that they're on a track to partnership. And for the most part, unless they screw up, they become partners. The feeling of those groups is that that's the way to treat colleagues, or it's that they're preserving, quote, independent physician practice, whatever the story. And I'm not denigrating that. That's their business philosophy. At the same time, the physicians who are joining the groups which are already, we'll just say, owned by outsiders, non-physicians, those physicians are coming to those practices not only with no ability to become an owner, but they have no expectation because of that fact. They're simply going to work. Now, they may mature in terms of getting increases in compensation up to some full-fledged, seniority level. They may come in plugged in exactly at the same level as everyone else. It doesn't make any difference. But whatever profit that practice makes is never going to become that physician's, or a piece of that isn't going to become that new physician employees. That's just not part of the deal. The owners, because they do own the practice, nothing wrong with that. That was the deal. They are pulling that profit out. It belongs to them. That was the entrepreneurial risk that they took when they put their money on the line or put their credit on the line to borrow money to acquire the practice to begin with. So if there's a large pool of physicians, as these large publicly owned or investor-owned groups grow, there's a large group of those who are able to employ physicians without the expectation of ownership. Why is it that a physician-owned group has to continue to maintain the model of every physician who passes the cut becomes an owner? Instead, it will become more and more possible as younger physicians' expectations change to employ those physicians on a pure employment basis, offering perhaps other incentives, other employee benefits, not in the traditional HR sense, but in terms of practice freedom, in terms of true longevity, in terms of being treated other than, as physician number 1,435, when compared with what the very large investor-owned groups will be able to do. Now, that may not be your model because you may be completely invested in the notion of the collegial group. So take this then for filing away. On the other hand, if you understand that you've placed your money, your time, your credit at risk in building the practice and in many cases a significant sized business structure over the years, then consider whether you should be entitled to a return on that through true ownership as opposed to simply continuing with a model in which everyone shares in the equity. That is a question for groups to consider. There's a process by which to consider that, and there's a process by which to restructure your group if that's indeed what your interest is.